Hey, hi, this is Glenn Garvin, and I've got the honor of Josh. Let me say, do I know your pronunciation of your name right? Is it Strycula? Strycula?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's it.
Strycula. Strycula.
Yeah.
Okay. So Josh Strycula, Mason City Councilman, and I appreciate you spending some time with me. I've sent some emails to the Mason City Council and haven't had those returned. You know, I haven't got a lot of response, so it does mean a lot that you're willing to help me understand, and maybe some of the people out there who don't understand a lot of what's going on with the city council.
Sure.
You know, and definitely don't want to put you in a compromised position. So if there's anything you can't discuss, please refrain. Um, so as I understand it, a month or so ago, you proposed a ordinance 2020-43. So maybe you could give me a little background on what that was and how did it come about.
Yeah, sure. And Glenn, thanks again. Thanks for being engaged. Thanks for caring and just paying attention. Really, I think we've seen an increase of that recently, mostly I think from just ease of access, maybe. But I do appreciate you and appreciate the questions you've asked. And yeah, with 43, I mean, again, the genesis of this was, I saw what was happening early on, right? We had a government mandated shutdown of small businesses, local businesses, restaurants, and I felt like there had to be something that we could do, and didn't know exactly what that was. And then that's kind of the genesis of what 43 came from, was, hey, how can we help? What can we do? There's been a lot of references, I think, to Hamilton's plan, and that was the first thing that I saw that said, hey, the city at the local level, we can do something. Look at how they've done it. So that's what got my attention. And then it was a conversation with the city manager and some other city officials to say, hey, can we do something like this? Is it feasible? And then how do we do it? And so that's really kind of where it came from and how we did that. So we spent a lot of time talking over a couple of days to, at least from my side, vet it as best as we could. So come up with the amount. So that's where it was a cash grant of $500,000. So we came up with the amount. Can we do it? Can the city do it? And how do we do it? Where does it come from? And then the conduit at which we get that to the businesses. So we talked about a couple different options, and then that's where this idea of going through the Mason Deerfield Community Development Corporation came out, was through a conversation with the city, because it's really difficult for the city to be able to do something on their side. And so it was a matter of, does this make the most sense to go with that?
So that's how the funds in your proposal, the funds were going to be distributed through the Chamber of Commerce's or the Maid Council's CDC or the Community Development Corporation, right?
That's right. Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes in, is that it's not the chamber.
Okay.
The chamber is built for businesses, right? So their job is to advocate for businesses, local businesses within the region. The Community Development Corporation is a spinoff of the chamber.
Okay.
And so if the chamber is there for the business owner, the CDC is there for the business owner, the employees, the landlord of that location, and the residents that surround that. So it's there for all of the stakeholders.
Okay.
And it's a true 501c3 nonprofit. So they have the ability to do things that the chamber can't do, which is raise funds, it's disperse funds in different ways, right?
Okay.
And the CDC came from, this wasn't something that the chamber came up with. Almost every city has a version of the CDC, right? So it's not something new. It's not unique to Mason. It's not well, I won't say that, but it's not, they've been accused of some pretty nasty things, and that's not what it is either, right? And it came out of, it was a couple years ago. It was actually a consultant that Deerfield Township had hired from Atlanta that said, hey, you guys need one of these, and here's why. And it was reasons, right? So then Deerfield Township went to the chamber and said, hey, you guys need to create one of these. So they said, okay. So it has a separate board. It has a separate thing. Branding is similar. So it's not through the chamber, it's through the CDC. That was the idea anyway, was to use the CDC. And again, the piece is that these people are on the ground, right? They've got their finger on the pulse of the community as a whole, not just the small business, but the community as a whole. So what needs it, and they have the infrastructure in place to be able to do that. So that was the streamlined process to get these funds out. And then it came to me, so that was that first week. And so it's like, well, how do we present this? How do we do this? And is it even possible? So then that's when I picked up the phone and called the CDC and said, hey, one, are you guys able to do it? And then two, are you willing? If we do something, right? There was never any promise or anything like that, but it was, hey, could you guys do this? And so they were like, well, yeah, we'll work on it, see if we can do something. And that's what led to that first work session on, I think it was March 28th, as we had the first work session. So, and there were some conversations there that I had with the mayor, offline, some discussions about how I felt that we needed to have a meeting much earlier, much faster than our typical city council meeting, which wasn't going to be until April 13th. So that's what pushed up to that Saturday. So
special session, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So flashing forward a little bit, we've got what I call the hamstring version of this from Vice Mayor Gilb's $160,000 gift card idea. Obviously different distribution mechanisms, a whole different layout. And, something's better than nothing, which is why I guess everybody voted for, to do something for this. Can you talk about how that varies and what the distributions were, if you know, or how they would plan on administering this plan, if that's even been laid out?
Yeah, so again, the legislation's pretty bare when it comes to how. The conduit, again, they inserted the CDC into that, saying, hey, we want the CDC to take applications, find the need, purchase the gift cards, but then, hey, return those gift cards to the city if you don't mind, right? Okay. And so that's where it starts to kind of fall apart. It's like, well, it makes it difficult and almost puts the CDC in an awkward position to where it's like, well, that's not really what we're designed. I mean, it's not why we're here, right? I mean, and so they were trying to work within that framework of how do we do this? And all along we had talked about how, yes, Hamilton did gift cards, but gift cards are not the best way to do it for these businesses. We think it kind of, it creates some problems, I think, for the businesses, or could create some problems. Yes, it gets them cash now, but what does that look like in the future? And then how do you kind of redeem those gift cards, right? What is the city going to do with these gift cards, right? They're going to have a bag of $100,000 or $160,000 of gift cards sitting on their desk, right? So
right. And how do you get those out to the public, and who gets them, and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. And I think the idea is that they want to control the asset, right? Well, in this case, the asset would be gift cards. So we're gonna hold those. We're gonna put them in a drawer in somebody's desk in the city until we're ready to use them, I guess. So that's where it is now. The CDC did come up with a proposal of sorts of how they could do that and how it would work and how they would feel comfortable doing it where it wasn't detrimental to the businesses. And that was the Loaves and Fishes program that they came up with. Okay. The problem was that meeting that they were there, and I'm sure you saw it, is we didn't talk about the Loaves and Fishes program. I mean, they kind of presented it briefly, but none of the questions that were asked from council were related to that. We spent more time talking about the I don't know the right term, the unnecessary comments, I think, from council members the week before, right? And clarifying all of this stuff and then bringing up, I think, even more falsehoods and things like that. So it was unfortunate that we spent more time on the original ordinance, not how it was amended and not how we could even move forward. So then that puts, at least in my opinion, that put at least me in a position where, well, now I've got to defend or go back and correct some of these things and say, get motivations and things like that. So that was unfortunate. So now it's kind of up in the air as to how this is going to go on. And I'll bring up a point with that too, because it was specifically mentioned yesterday at the meeting during Councilmember Bradburn's speech that the CDC has denied, rejected, I think was the term they used, rejected even working with the city at this point. And that's actually absolutely false.
Right, yeah.
They have not. And I think there's even a public, there was a press release where they said, we're still working with the city on executing this ordinance, right?
Right.
So I'm not sure where he got that information, but it's wrong.
No, I've had a few people ask me to break down Tony Bradburn's speech one by one, but there's a lot of things that I would have some questions in about the validity of some of the statements that he said there.
Sure.
You know, one thing, and I'll share with you. When I first got involved with this, I did have a conversation with Mayor Grossman. Yeah, I don't know her well, but I had some past contact with her. And so she did call me and we talked through a little bit of this. But one of the things she told me in that conversation was that she was uncomfortable with the CDC and who they were and what their motivations would be in determining things. So I find it interesting that now that I hear this from you, that she was against it with the original plan, but then is for it now with the revised plan. And so I don't understand how that uncomfortness got corrected in her mind.
Well, I think the idea is that she doesn't, or the CDC doesn't keep any of the funds, right? So the way, well, I don't want to speak for her, but I think that's it. But
yeah,
it's interesting that you mentioned that she was uncomfortable with that at the beginning when, I mean, that was never brought up, right? We didn't hear any of these assigned motives until her speech, right? And then it really kind of came out to the public. And so it's not like, well, had you brought that up before? And she did, and I will say that, well, it's not public, but she did ask me, like, hey, is there another avenue that you would be willing to go through with this? I said, absolutely. Yeah. You bring it. This isn't, again, the original ordinance wasn't a, hey, take it or leave it.
Sure,
the work section was designed to say, hey, how can we work through this? But what you got and what you saw was, I'm absolutely against it. No. And not a, well, hold on. Is it the amount? Is it the, I mean, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, some level of compromise in good faith that this is something that we want to do for the public. And she had told me at that time as well, she wanted to do, something bigger and better, which she said, publicly of wanting to do a bigger and better program. Somehow that got, hamstrung to, a third of what the original proposal was.
Right.
So, all right. So moving forward, I don't know if there's anything more to say about that one, really. I think facts remain out. I remain frustrated by not seeing that there was, any further substantive conversation about it. That there wasn't any. Hey, let's try and work through this together. It was really showed me very quickly, and coming into it, not knowing any of the characters involved in this, and seeing very quickly that there was a divide and a very concrete one in the group.
Well, and Glenn, if I can expand on that just a little bit. I don't want to get into it too much, but one of the well, first, I think I was wrong in that I think I probably pushed back a little bit too hard initially, because for me it was an easy decision. Right? For me, this was supposed to be the thing, Glenn, that brought us all together. How could we not get behind doing something like this? What an amazing opportunity we have to show the community that we care, to show these small businesses that, hey, we've got you. We're going to do whatever we can. I know it's not going to be enough. But we're going to try. And here's our little piece that we can give. And gosh, if it gets you through a week or two, then we've done something. So that was kind of my approach. And that's, again, I had 4 or 5 days, I guess, to really kind of digest all this and walk through the process for me before it was even presented to council. So I was wrong in that I was like, I think I even made a comment at one point in that first meeting, like, hey, we've already talked about this for 40 minutes too long. Like, let's move on. And again, that was my first foray too. I mean, the mayor so graciously mentioned it, how I'm new, right? And I think that, well, her point bringing it up and mine are different, but this was my first foray in saying, hey, we got to work through something. We got to do this. Let's go. And I'm just not used to working at the pace of politics. I'm used to working at a much faster pace, I think. And again, it's not the legislation was drafted. It was ready if we were to move on it. But one of the things was, look, hey, we can amend this. You want additional accountability? Let's do it. Let's add it on. I mean, here's the qualifications I put down. Here's the accountability I think we need. But if you want some more, I mean, if you want to put somebody from the council on their board or whatever, well, the CDC would have to agree to that. But whatever it was, right? Let's figure it out. right?
Right.
Let's
Right.
talk about why we can't do this. Let's start talking about how we can, and then what we should do. And so when I get hit with a, hey, flat out no, I push back too hard. So that's my mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I should have backed off and been, I think, a little bit more open to hearing the why. But I think too, we've also seen a difference of narrative of reason, right? I mean, it was too much money at first. We heard that a lot, right? It's too much money. We can't. I mean, it's $500,000. We're not going to give $500,000 to small businesses, and it's not going to do anything anyway, right? That was the other piece, right? Well, it's not going to do anything.
Right.
So we did see that, and then knowing, and you mentioned it. Look, there's definitely a divide within council. Knowing that there is that divide, I purposefully did not want to. In hindsight, I don't know that I would have done it any different, but I purposely didn't get members involved from these other sides initially. As a matter of fact, the one that I did reach out to was the vice mayor, and just kind of let him know a little bit about what was going on. And then he was unavailable, unfortunately, for the first couple of meetings. So, but to try to prevent that, right? Because there's a lot of deep issues that have gone on for a long time that they're having difficulty, I think, moving past, that we've seen come to the surface again, right? So it's unfortunate that that's where we are. So anyway, those are just a couple of two clarifying points that I wanted to bring out. But.
Well, Josh, I'll say this to you. I watching your professionalism and decorum and what has turned into some, I think for most of the public, when we watch that, we anticipate those things going on in Washington, D.C., but not at City Hall of Mason. And I was shocked to see it. Couldn't imagine that could go on in my town. And I appreciate your level-headedness and professionalism and how you've handled things. And it wouldn't. I don't even blame people for some of the emotion that they've shown, because I think I would at the incredulousness of some of the stuff that's gone on.
Sure.
So last thing to ask you about. There's a proposal on the table right now that called Ordinance 2020-46, and this one's for I think $1.5 million. I'm very unclear of what's presented in this. It seems like to me, and again, being a novice watching this, that it looked like this thing was going to push through, or attempted to be pushed through, without much detail on a first read, and then now it's been tabled to discuss further. But it's got to be frustrating looking at that thing, getting pushed through, and your proposal for a third of that to help small businesses received so much stall, delay, and politicking.
Well, it's definitely frustrating, but it's also confusing. I don't think maybe confusing, not just even for me, but also for you. Because you're right. Yeah, there's the conversation was, well, we need time, right? The 43 was tabled twice. It got thrown back into a committee. And again, I think in normal times, ideally, we want things to go through our committees, right? That's why we've set up the committee type structure.
Sure.
But the committees only really have power for how much we give to them, right? If there's 4 votes on council to pass something, it'll pass, right? It doesn't have to go through committee. But the idea is, yes, in a perfect world, that's what we want. We want the things to go through the committee. We want that committee group to be able to talk through things to go through that. But if you look at the committees that it's gone through, is finance and economic development. I'm not on either of those committees, which is fine. But so for that process to have happened, I would have had to have called somebody on that committee and said, hey, here's my idea. And then they would have had to have then presented it to the committee. The committee would have then voted on it, if you will, and then brought it up. I mean, we'd still be talking about it, which we are anyway. So maybe it would have been fine.
Right.
But this was, in my mind, it was an emergency situation. We needed to move forward. And again, I was probably pushing too hard, because it was, I think it needed to be done. It needed to be done now. It wasn't to replace any federal program, any of that stuff, all those things we've heard, right? Nobody that I know of, well, I'll speak for myself. I never discouraged anybody from filing for the federal programs or doing any of that, right? I mean, absolutely do it. I think I made the analogy, right, that the community is on fire and everybody's grabbing a bucket of water and going to put it out. Not a single bucket is going to put that fire out. And this was our bucket, right? This is all we were doing. So everybody needs to grab their bucket. Everybody needs to do their thing. But yeah, to see that get pushed and pushed and pushed, and then to come up and, hey, we voted on this amendment that we just saw for council 5 minutes before the meeting, that now we've got to vote. So again, so I'm stuck in an awkward position where it's like, well, I want to do something, right? And if this can somehow work, then let's do it, right? Let's figure it out. It will help some, right? And then 3 items down, now we're voting on $1.5 million. That it's pretty vague. I mean, let's be honest. There's not a whole lot in there. There's not a lot of meat. And all of the, I think, questions with 43, Ordinance 43 that came up, right? No accountability. It's not specific enough. It's too much money. How do we do this? How do we administer this? All those questions that they had that were actually answered in the ordinance and with the supporting documentation. Exhibit A was the service agreement. We actually had a service agreement filled out. None of that actually exists in 46. So again, so I'm confused. Like, well, wait a second. I mean, just a couple of days ago, because we've had 15-minute meetings, right? I mean, just a couple of days ago, you said, well, there's not enough accountability here. Well, and $1.5 million, where's the accountability? You just said you needed time, but all 4 members. So you have a first reading of an item. You can vote to suspend the rule and adopt after the first reading, and that takes 5 votes. And so luckily it didn't pass. It was 4-3. But all 4 of those members who wanted time on Ordinance 43, who wanted to think through things, which is fine. Look, I'm not saying that that's wrong. I think I'm not saying it was wrong.
Understood.
Are saying, no, we don't have to think about this now. Let's pass it. We're going to pass it out of the first reading. We're going to pass triple what you're asking. We're going to do this, man. Let's do this thing. And I know it doesn't really say anything in there, but let's just do it. And so it's really confusing for me and frustrating, right, as well.
Yeah.
To now, I mean, now let's fast forward a week and a half to now what we get yesterday is we need time. I think Councilmember Bradford mentioned 2 or 3 times in his conversation, hey, we need time. We need time to think about this.
Right.
And I'm just I'm not saying that we can't change our minds, and I'm not saying that we can't have a change of heart and that we can't sit back and sleep on something and say, you know what, gosh, we should step back a little bit. But to see this happen so many times, right, where it's just almost contradictory statements, right, and they're all recorded, and so we can look back and look, so, and this doesn't answer any of the questions that they wanted answered with 43. So those are the problems I think I'm having with some of that, and that's what we were trying to do yesterday. And again, I think the frustrating part, the confusing part is that we're there to talk about 46. We're there to move forward. At least I am, because I'm sitting here for the last couple of weeks saying, okay, well, how do we move forward? We passed this amendment. How do we move forward? What are we doing next? What's the next step, right? Even 43 was only supposed to be a stepping stone, right? Because it was just, hey, maybe this is the first round. Maybe this is just the first step.
Right.
We can do, this is that short-term solution. And then now we can look at the midterm and the longer-term solutions later, right?
I always looked at that initial proposal as, hey, it's not going to save a business. Maybe, like you said, a bucket of water is a great analogy for it, but just giving something, just saying, hey, you chose Mason to be your home for your business, and we appreciate you and partner with you in that process. And here's something that might help to your rent or helping to pay some payroll or something to keep you afloat during this time. It's not going to be a replacement for a federal program. I don't think anyone suggested that it would be. That was another one of the shocking statements I heard yesterday. And I've never heard anyone discourage anyone from participating in that. I think most small businesses in Mason attempted to try and do it. As we know, the federal program hasn't been a smooth rollout. Some people benefited from it and some haven't at this point, and hopefully more will. But I think the bucket of water that we could have provided to the small business owners of Mason would have been huge if we could have got that done when we did. What we can do now is still on the table. So,
yeah. So and hopefully
so
they get 46 because I think it has been moved to a committee, and I hope they do come up with something. I think I'd be willing to look at it for sure. But
sure.
I mean, bring me something, right? I mean, I think I did.
Let's see what. Hopefully, we'll see what it is more than just a name on a one-liner on a piece of paper, trying to figure out what all that money would be spent for.
That's right. Yeah. So.
Well, I appreciate you spending some time, and hopefully we'll post this online for some people. So I appreciate it. I've got a greater understanding of it, and hopefully it can help some other people as well, so they can get some of their questions answered and get a little understanding behind what's happened in the council meetings.
Yeah, absolutely, Glenn. I appreciate you and appreciate what you're doing out there.
Well, thanks, Josh.
All right, thank you. Take care.